Today we're going to replace the fuel injector for an Acura MDX 2003, and it's the cheapest for $31.99. This is brand new. Okay, so one of the first things we're going to do here is we got to remove the cover. So going to remove the 4 tabs slowly so we don't break the legs. And you see the screw that's in there, 10 millimeters. I'm going to use that and take off the rest of the caps and remove the cover. Okay, so the cover is removed. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this other additional cover here. Simply twist these counterclockwise, remove this, and this will pull out. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is remove the cable, just for safety reasons. I recommend you do that. And then I'm going to remove the air filter cover. To remove the cover, simply unscrew. There's several screws that go around. Just go ahead and start unscrewing those, and it should lift. I'm actually going to lift this and get the air filter out, and then I'll continue working my way through removing the neck. Okay, I loosened the screw here to loosen the belt so the neck can pull out. Next thing I'm going to do is pull these ones out. Okay, so I pushed this a little bit back, and I pulled it out. So now you can see it's come out. Looks like I got some other stuff attached here. So I need to disconnect this. Looks like some sensor. Looks like simply just press and pull out now this whole cover. The next thing I'm going to do is remove this cover. Again, 10 millimeters. Okay, so the cover is removed. You can see the gasket. Don't break it. It's metal, and it also exposes the bolts so that we can loosen the whole manifold and be able to pull that out. Okay, several things to disconnect. This hose, you can see here, disconnecting this particular hose as well. I'm sure there's a few others. Disconnected this hose and this connector so far. Okay, I'm also going to disconnect this particular connector. Make sure you push up and pull. That was disconnected there. And now we're going to disconnect this one. Squeeze, pull out. Here's another. Squeeze, pull out, and I'm going to disconnect this hose also. This one should just be, let's just pull out. Okay, I'm disconnecting these 2 hoses. They have antifreeze. A little bit of will drip, so make sure you put a rag. Okay, so I needed to remove this connector. It's a very interesting one. The way to remove it is you have to squeeze right here. You hear a little pop, squeeze, and then you can see this is like a lever. You need to start pulling down on it, and as it pulls down, you'll notice that this here will slowly start to lift out. There we go. And then you can push out. I should be able to pull out now. There you go. Okay, the next thing I'm doing here is I'm unscrew. There's 2 screws here. We'll move this one, and there's one right behind it. Make sure you unscrew those 2. can see it's not loose, and I'm gonna have to remove this hose. Okay, disconnected the hose, and so far so good. If you're putting it back together, make sure you go through the same process but in reverse order. Okay, all the bolts are loose now. I took actually the two nuts out. You could feel the manifold now loose. I can probably lift it. I'm going to do it very carefully. I won't be able to film this, and if there's anything attached I will know very soon, but it should come out, and I'll film that afterwards. Okay, the manifold lifted right up. Nothing was in the way. Everything was very smooth. Actually, we can see the fuel injectors here, and I'll probably need to pull the rest of this out, give a little more room. Okay, the gasket looks okay. One other gasket I needed to remove. You can see that. And I simply squeezed and pull. You can see exposed there the fuel injector. Okay, after you remove the connector, this connector here, you, I guess remove the rest of them. What you're going to notice is underneath this rail, this bar here, if I can give you a view, there is a screw. It might be a little too blurry. Stick your socket there and loosen that one, and there'll be another one over here. Okay, so what I did was simply just pull up, and the fuel injectors will pop out. You'll notice it's connected here. One of the things I did was I removed these pins that were there connecting the top. So pull these pins out to unplug pull out the fuel injector itself. The other thing I need to do, and I already did it to one here, is squeeze these to pull out the cable. Okay. When I removed this pin, I actually dropped it in this chamber in there, and so I was like, oh man, what am I going to do? I have a little magnet, and I taped it onto my screwdriver. It's a magnet, so I was able to reach it and pull it out. Just a little trick in case you happen to drop something inside these holes, so be real careful. Okay, so I put the fuel injectors back into the slot because I noticed that there's a lot of dirt around and I want to clean. I don't want it to fall inside the chamber. Okay, I've cleaned them up right there. Okay, here's the brand new fuel injector, nice and clean. And you can see here's the rail. You can pivot the rail. Start with the bottom one where you see the little notch right there. You can see it right here. So I'm going to stick that in. Okay, I'm going to need two hands, so you'll see it after the fact. Okay, the fuel injector is, I pushed it in. Now I'm going to slide this in here. You'll see there's grooves. There's a groove on the side, and then there's the little lip on the top, and so I'm going to slip it in like that. It'll make sure it's completely all the way in. I'm going to need two hands for this, so you'll see the after effect. Okay, this is the pin pushed in. Should go in very easily. There's no straining of any sort. Each of the new fuel injectors is in. Make sure you double check. I don't want to have to repeat this again or put it all together and find out something's wrong. Make sure that it's very well seated, that the metals are right into the grooves, and that there's also these little grooves and little tongues, or I don't know what you call them, but on both sides you should see these little fill in right in the gap, and this connect up to the grooves at the top. So for each one of these. Okay, so I'm going to be pivoting this now, and I'm going to be sliding these right into their sockets. So I'm going to need hands, both hands for these, and you'll see it once I put it all in. Okay. The rail slipped right in very easily. I try to stick it in evenly on both ends, just push it down. It went in nice and smooth. The next thing is to tighten. Remember, there are these screws that I've got to put in there, and try not to drop it, the screw underneath there, or you'll have to go get it. So there's two of them. I'm going to tighten it. I actually, the screw was actually kind of small, and I ended up having to use a 5/16 for that for this particular screw. So 5/16 is what I ended up using. If you guys have metric tools at smaller sizes, perfect, but I had to improvise. Okay, it's the rail is screwed in, and now it's kind of time to start plugging these things back in. I'm going to plug in the fuel injectors, connect the connectors here. They look looks good, looks clean. Make sure it's seated real well, and then these here should be able to just push it back in. Okay, it's all tight. So the first set is done. I'm going to repeat the same process for my other three in the back. It seemed a little bit intimidating at first, but now it really seems very easy. If you're a do-it-yourself kind of guy, try it out. Okay, the other fuel injectors have been done. So now I've got my 6 fuel injectors in. I'm going to start putting things back. Again, before you start putting the cam on, make sure all of these connections are in. You can't just pull out. Everything is nicely connected. Everything looks fine. The fuel, double check that. Make sure all of this is okay. You don't want any fuel leakage. It's a fuel line. I actually I never disconnected it. So, but it looks fine, you know, because I lifted this and pivot. Same thing for this one. Lifted it up, pivot it. It's kind of nice that they have these little arms here to help you pivot. And I'm going to start putting the gasket back on and start layering it, putting all that, making sure all the hoses later on get connected. So, and I'm going to also have to torque the overhead cam on, so I'm going to record that for you as well. I'm going to start by putting back the gaskets. I'm not going to replace them. They look fine. Make sure that everything's clean. We don't want any debris. Okay. So again, make sure everything is clean. Okay, that's on there. And the gasket. Okay, very good. You can see the holes. Everything looks good, fitting. Now I'm going to put the manifold on, so I won't be able to quite record that. Well, I needed both hands, so there's just no way I could lift this and record this at the same time. But it's actually pretty easy. It's not too heavy. Just follow these screws that are sticking out. Stick them in the right hole. Very simple, very easy. Okay, so one of the things I need to do is I need to determine what the torque is. So now that I have that, manually just put them in, kind of quickly just tighten them. They're very loose. So now I'm going to use the torque wrench. Make sure you have a torque wrench. I torqued the bolts. I'm going to start putting these connectors back in. Make sure you don't forget. I'm going to start from the left side. Double check everything. Start putting these holes back in. Okay, put that clamp back in. Make sure I'm not forgetting or leaving anything loose. Continue to work my way now to the right. Make sure you bring in this hose. There's 2 bolts here. I'll adjust these and tighten these 2, and then I'll move on to the next thing. Okay, putting this connector back in. Make sure the arm is all the way down. Start sliding it in so this little notch here slides in. There you go. And you push it in, you see it lifts. And lock it in place. Just take the arm, push on it, hear the snap, and that's in. Okay, let's put these hoses in. There we go. To the other one. Okay, I'm going to grab some pliers, need 2 hands. Okay, the clamps are on. Now time to put this in. Goes here. Goes up here. This connects to this brace. This hose, just gotta use the other hand here. I'm gonna put the cover back on. I'll do that next. Put the gasket on again. I'm reusing it. And then now I'm gonna put the cover back on. Try to clean up as much oil as there was in there. Again, the bolts are real loose. I need to torque them. To expedite this, I went ahead and put the air filter and air filter cover back in. Tighten this bolt here, the ring, stuck in the pipe of the hose, and connected the air sensor. Screw the bolts in for the air filter. I'm going to put the plate, this little cover, back on and connect this hose. And finally connect the battery cable back on. That's it for the fuel injector removal and installation.